Happy Thursday, 6th grade. Welcome to the third part of our history lesson. Um, Obviously, you can see in your video I have it open to lesson 1, starting on page 1. You're on page 35 if you're in your book. We're going to cruise through there. I decided I'd start here on page 1 in this lesson and work you through what we talked about in the last few days. So we're studying geography. We started on page 1 talking about the best representation is a globe, because that's how our Earth is. It's three-dimensional, and yet globes aren't the greatest because they show the whole Earth and then have to be made flat. That moved us to page 2, talking about latitude and longitude. Latitude goes horizontal, longitude goes vertical. Latitude chops into hemispheres, north and south, longitude east and west. Then we started talking about how every map will be distorted in some way because we can't take a three-dimensional surface, put it on a two-dimensional flat map. So we looked at the different map projections that were out there as we worked our way through this. That was Tuesday. Then Wednesday we started talking about these 5 themes of geography and got into the 6 essential elements of looking at, when we study a place, the whole part of it, not only the physical but the people, the culture, and how they change, move, and interact with it. We ended up yesterday talking about the type of some maps, from physical, which is going to show what the Earth looks like, to political, showing your boundaries and how states are divided. We moved into special purpose maps that can show just about anything you can imagine. And we ended with talking about a map key, the symbols on it, the scale on it, and the directions of it. So today we're going to move on with this one, starting to talk about the different charts, graphs, and diagrams that'll be there. You can see at the top of your page on the book, guys, we're still in lesson 1. The essential question is, how does geography influence the way people live? And as we understand what the Earth is like, it'll impact us with that. On the right side, guys, is the notes that we're going to be filling out as we cruise along. Those of you who have your hardcover history book down, we're near the bottom of page 35. I'll get rolling. Charts, graphs, and diagrams are tools for showing information. The first step to understanding these visual aids is to read the title. This tells you the subject. So often we just look at the pretty picture, don't we? Now, make sure we start with the title and get those things. Charts show facts in an organized way. They arrange information in rows and columns. You're into your blanks now, guys. To read a chart, look at the labels on the top of each column and on the left side of the charts. The labels explain what the chart is showing. Graphs come in different types. Bar graphs use thick, wide lines to compare, into your notes, data. They are useful for comparing amounts. So bar graphs, I can look real easy and look at the different amounts. Line graphs show changes over a particular period of time. Your next parts of your notes, but how we use line graphs in math class and here is showing the differences of how it's going up or down over time. A climate graph has a fancy vocabulary word. A climograph combines a line graph and a bar graph. It shows the long-term weather patterns of a place. To read a bar graph, line graph, or climograph, look at the labels along the sides and bottoms. The vertical line along the side of the graph is the y-axis. The horizontal line along the bottom is the x-axis. That's math terms we'll learn later. You learned it last year in 5th grade. One axis tells you what is being measured. The other is telling you the units of measure that are being used. Pie graphs are circular graphs that show how a whole of something is divided into parts. So you have your next blank on letter D. Each slice shows a part or percentage of the whole pie. The entire pie adds up to 100%. We'll spend a lot of time with that as we talk about that in math class. Last on this page says diagrams are special drawings. They show steps in a process. Point out the parts of an object or explain how something works. An elevation profile is a diagram that shows a piece of land as if it were sliced open. This shows changes in heights. And so you had your last blank filled into there on letter E. To the next page, like geographers, history study population, they study culture, and they study the movement of people, ideas, and goods. Historians are interested in how these things change over time. So you have your first blank of geographers filled in there. Population refers to how many people live in a specific area or place. And you have your next blank filled in there. Geographers study this in great detail. They look at what sorts of people make up a population. So Young, old, men, women, what kind of jobs they have, all those things are factored into there. They examine how fast the population grows or shrinks over time. They also measure what's called population density. This is the average number of people living in a square mile or a square kilometer. A choropleth uses colors to show population density. So number 4 on your notes, guys, population density, how many people live in a certain area. We use this a lot to say how much resources does our government need to put into a certain area, because we just don't want to say, well, we're going to give the same resources per every square mile, because in some places you live out in the country, there's going to be like 10 people in a square mile. You're in the middle of a city downtown, there's going to be thousands and thousands of people of square mile. So population density is very important to study with how the land's being used and what we're going to do with the resources of those lands. Population can also change location. The movement of people from one place to another is called migration. Throughout history, there have been many migrations of human beings. So number 5 on your notes, but migration, we usually lots of times think that of birds flying south in the winter. They're migrating. Humans have done the same thing. There have been major movements of people. You can think about that biblically. The Israelites coming out of Egypt was a migration. The Israelites going into the Promised Land was a migration. The Europeans moving to America and settling the United States was a huge migration. We'll study a lot of those throughout all of ancient history. And the last section, culture and change. Culture is a set of beliefs, behaviors, and traits shared by the members of a group. Scholars study cultures by examining the language, religion, government, and customs of different groups. So you have number 6 on your blanks, guys, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about culture. Culture is really important. We can break it down many different ways. We could talk about the American culture, what we lots of times refer to as the American dream, what brought people here to America in the first place. We can talk about cultures based on your religion. In other words, each religion has things that go along with that. And it's kind of interesting, just depending on how you divide the group that you're talking about with culture. Obviously, different ethnicities have their own culture that goes along with that. Lots of times we'll talk about the difference in the North and the South. You come from the South and they have a culture of being what we call more hospitable, having people over, cooking big meals for them. That's a big deal in the South, where they say that's part of their culture. At Thanksgiving, I want to have a turkey. You ever wonder why we eat turkey? That's a culture thing that not everybody else does. Putting up Christmas trees, exchanging gifts, that's something that goes along with our culture and things we believe in. And then obviously, guys, when you go about a set of beliefs when it comes to culture is also thing. I was taught growing up, hard work equals success. That's a belief system that is part of the American dream that has been taught to me. Okay, so that's part of the American culture that's out there. Last paragraph. Throughout history, different people have met through exploration, migration, and trade. These meetings often lead to what we call cultural diffusion. In cultural diffusion, each group shares part of its culture with the other. Sometimes a completely new culture is formed. Many historians believe this happened in India as a result of the Aryan migration. Okay, so you got number 7 blank filled in there as we moved through that last paragraph, but this is what historians love to study. As two different groups of people meet each other, what happens to their cultures? Does one dominate over the other? Do they become blended? So lots of times I look at and think of different things that have happened over time. For instance, in America, we sometimes call ourselves a melting pot. We've taken a ton of different ethnicities, we've put them together in America, and they each grab and put those things together and has a major influence of it. You think about your Black History program, and we celebrate lots of times the music and the impact that the Black culture has had on music and how it's changed everything. The blending of that stuff is fun to look at. Food is another great example. You go to a Chinese buffet, it'll still have a ton of different foods out there, not just Chinese food, but Chinese buffet, guys, is something you would never eat in China. Buffet is an American culture thing. We like to eat a lot. Other cultures do not eat a lot. And so we need to understand these different cultures. And as we look at them, guys, when they're different than what we're used to as the American culture, that doesn't make ours right and theirs wrong. We can have two different cultures and believe those things. So, for instance, I always tell kids, hey, hard work equals success. Well, let's pretend that I married a millionaire's daughter and I have an easy life now because I married into wealth. You know what? I probably wouldn't teach you hard work equals success. I would probably teach you it's who you know or who you marry that equals success, because if I married a millionaire's daughter and I all of a sudden have all this money just because of who I married, I didn't need to work hard for it. And so I might have my own set of beliefs with her. My belief isn't wrong, guys. And so often today we look at the different beliefs people have, and I make my belief right and the other person's belief wrong. We can't do that. We got to learn to share beliefs and say, I disagree with your belief, and here's why, but you're still entitled to your belief. We see that a lot in politics, guys. All the politicians do is argue that they're wrong and the other side's right, or the other side's right and they're wrong. They can both be right. They can both hang on to their beliefs. And so make sure we, as we go through this year and we talk about the different things that their cultures valued, that you can look at that and say, I don't like it that they value that. It's okay that they did, but I'm not going to put that into my life. Or we might look at a culture and say, man, that is really cool that they value that. I, up until this point, didn't really value that, but now I do. I'll give you a few examples of my life. Being raised, I'm from German heritage. We're called stoic. We don't really show our feelings that much. So growing up, I was not hugged, kissed. We didn't say I love you all the time. That's just not what German people did. Now that's not wrong, but as I've taught here in Milwaukee for 15 years, I've learned, man, it's okay to express your feelings and to show your emotions and to give hugs and things like that. And so you'll hear me all the time to say to a kid, hey, do you need a hug? You look like you're having a bad day. That is, as I've looked at other people and other cultures, I realized, man, I like that. I'm going to bring that into my life when before that it wasn't there. And so I have a chance in my mind to grow because I've been in contact with other cultures. So as we go through this ancient history, guys, for the rest of the year, hey, take the time to look at some things and say, can I learn something? We always want to be growing that way. All right, after 3 days, we finally got done with lesson 1. So you have that little worksheet now, guys. You can use your notes from the previous few days to help you with that worksheet. Make sure you understand that worksheet encompasses all of lesson 1, not just what we talked about today. Good luck. Have a great day.